Everyone, hope you guys are having a fantastic day today. Today's video is a pretty simple video. We just want to go through one of these NBT style questions that you can typically expect in your NBTs. Obviously, the NBTs, every single NBT is different. So if you write your NBT on one date versus another date, all the NBT exams are going to be different. And there's so many different types of NBT questions. So sometimes it can be very difficult to say that this question, you will definitely get a question like this because there's so many different types of questions. But we do have a very big pool of videos that we're going to be dropping today and of course in the next few days as well as the next few weeks, just going through typical NBT style questions that you can typically expect in your NBT. But if you want access to as many different types of questions that you can get right now, we actually do have a dedicated NBT preparation course that you can get on our website. It is a full in-depth course, and the course is not just the course itself, just teaching you what's in the NBTs, but there's over 1,500 or up to 1,500 practice quiz questions in the form of practice exams as well as lesson quizzes. So if you're someone who just really just wants to prepare for the NBT right now quickly, just to get that practice out the way, you can definitely go ahead and purchase our course. Right now, we're actually offering our course at a 20% discount. So for a limited time, you can actually get the course for 20% off discount. So just to make it easier for many more people to get access to this course. But without further ado, let's actually jump into this video and actually solve this typical NBT math question right now. So as you can see, it's a pretty simple question, or I don't know, simple is relative depending on the person. But as you can see, it says here, what is the remainder when 3x cubed minus 5x squared minus 7x plus 20 is divided by x squared minus 2x minus 3? So what you can see here, you basically have the fact that they're asking for the remainder in that case. When you have two things being divided by each other, this is basically a polynomial long division question, right? As they normally call it, that's what it's called. So you have two polynomials and you're basically dividing them by one another. Similar to how you would typically have two numbers and you would divide them by each other using long division, right? So in this case, whenever you have questions like this where they ask you for the remainder of two polynomials being divided by each other, you basically just have to use long division in this process. So the first thing that you're going to do whenever you have questions like this, right, is that you're going to create a long division structure like that, right? So you have your long division thing set up, and of course we need to ask ourselves what is being divided and what is the divider, right? So in this case, we're actually, the thing that's being divided is the cubic function, right, or the cubic expression, and then the divider is the quadratic expression, right? So we should always make sure the difference between those is very clear, because that's really we have to get that right in the beginning before we actually do the division, right? So in this case, we'll call this the divider. The actual proper word of it is actually called the divisor. That's actually the official word, right? And then the one that's being divided is called the dividend. Right, so that's the dividend, right? So the thing that's being divided is the dividend, and the divider is the divisor in this case, right? And whenever we set up long division questions, we should always put the divisor on the outside. So therefore, it's going to be x squared minus 2x minus 3. And then the dividend will be inside. So that's going to be 3x cubed minus 5x squared minus 7x plus 20. So this is pretty much what we're going to do. Apologies for my terrible handwriting. Let me actually make that a little bit nicer so it's more clear to see, right? So therefore we have that pretty simple. Now we're pretty much good to go, right? So now the first thing that we're going to do, right? Obviously these ones, when it comes to polynomials, these ones can be a little bit more tricky because obviously you have to, because obviously in this case you have like an actual expression. It's not just numbers. So it's very sometimes it can be quite hard kind of thinking about that. But the easiest way to start this process, right, is let's just focus on the x squared in the divisor, right? So whenever we have polynomial long division questions, you always want to focus on the first term, or the x squared term in that case, right? Or the term that has the highest exponent, right? When you look at the divider, right? So in this case, this will be in that case, it's going to be the x squared. So this is going to be term with highest exponent, right? And then what we're going to do is we're going to actually compare it now with the actual dividend, right? So now we're going to say, okay, how many times does x squared go into 3x squared, right? That's the first thing that we're going to do, similar to how you do it in typical long division questions, right? So we're going to ask ourselves, how many times does x squared go into 3x squared, right? So when you think about it, right, 3x cubed, my bad, divided by x squared, right? When you actually divide the two, what you're actually left with, right? Obviously these two if you simplify this, this therefore becomes 3, and then x to the power of 3 minus 2, and then therefore you're left with x to the power x times, or 3x to the power of 1, which is just basically just 3x, right? So in that case, you can basically say that x squared goes into 3x cubed 3x times, right? So you kind of have to think about it like that. Basically, you're just asking yourself, what is this divided by that? That's basically the amount of times that this goes into that, right? So in that case, we can see that we're left with 3x, right? So then what we're going to do is that 3x, right? We're going to actually write that 3x right here at the top. I'll just use green, right? So that's going to be, we're going to write that at the top just like that, right? Because in this case, we know that x squared goes into 3x cubed 3x times, right? Or if you want to look at it like that, right? Cool. So now that we've done that, so now once we've done that, we're going to now say, okay, 3x times this x squared, right? So therefore, we're going to say 3x times this x squared, but not just the x squared actually, but times this entire expression, right? Because just like we do in long division, we normally multiply that, and then we're going to end up subtracting it from the actual dividend in this case, right? So therefore, we're going to say 3x times this expression, right? So let me just remove this so that it's a lot more clear to see, right? So 3x times this entire expression. So therefore, that's going to be 3x cubed. And then 3x times negative 2x, that's going to be negative 6x squared. And then 3x times negative 3, that's going to be negative 9x. Just like that, right? So now that we've done that, now we can subtract the two, right? So now we can subtract the two, just like you would typically do in long division questions. So therefore, this is going to become, obviously you want to put this in brackets because you want to make sure that the signs are correct, because obviously we have other negative signs here, as you can see. So we want to make sure that we also account for that. So when we subtract it, everything is consistent, right? So therefore, when we subtract it, we now know that in this case, when we subtract the two, let me just use black again, and let me just remove some of these just to make it clear. So therefore, now when we subtract it, we know that 3x squared cubed minus 3x cubed obviously is going to be 0. And we know that negative 5x squared and then minus negative 6x squared, that's actually going to end up becoming a plus. So it's negative 5x squared plus 6x squared. In that case, it's just going to be, you're just going to be left with x squared. And then what you're going to do with the 7x, you're going to be like, okay, negative 7x, and then because it's a negative sign and a negative sign, it's going to be plus 9x, right? So negative 7x plus 9x, that's going to give you plus 2x. Just like that, right? So it's just important to always make sure you remember that whole philosophy of the negatives and making sure you keep that consistency, which is very important, right? So now we've subtracted all of that, and now this is pretty much what we left with. We left with x squared plus 2x, right? But then now remember with long division, normally the term that we didn't use yet, now we can bring it down and basically do the exact same thing that we did, right? So now we can bring down the 20. And now it becomes like this, right? So now we're going to basically repeat the exact same step that we just did all over again, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to basically say, okay, how many times is x squared minus 2x minus 3, or in this case, actually not the entire expression, but as mentioned, we're just going to focus on the x squared whenever we kind of doing that, right? So now we're going to ask ourselves, how many times does x squared go into x squared, right? Obviously it's once because it's the same thing, right? X squared goes into x squared only once, right? So therefore, we're going to say, at the top here, we're going to say plus 1, and then we're going to do the exact same thing, right? So therefore, what we're going to do is we're going to then say 1, then this is going to be 1 times this entire expression right here, right? So therefore, that's going to be minus basically 1 times this entire expression. So that's going to be x squared minus 2x and then minus 3, just like that, right? Cool. And then I'm just going to remove this just to make it more clean. And therefore, once we subtract the 2, right, we're just going to basically subtract. So therefore, x squared minus x squared, that's going to be 0. And then 2x minus 2x, because this is now going to be plus, right? So 2x plus 2x, that's going to be 4x. And then the 20, in this case, 20 minus 3, that's going to be 20 plus 3, so that's going to be plus 23. And pretty much this is the final answer, and this is the furthest that we can go. We can't bring down any other numbers, so therefore this is literally the final answer to this question, 4x plus 23. And then now when we actually select the correct answer from the actual question itself, we can see that the correct answer for this question is in fact A right there, right? So your correct answer will be A, which is 4x plus 23. So this, what we have here, this is actually the remainder, right? So whenever you do any long division questions, I'm sure a lot of you remember long division and from school and all those things. Whenever you do long division questions, you will always be left with a remainder. In that case, sometimes your remainder will be 0, meaning there's no remainder. But in this case, whenever we have polynomial long division, typically you would have some sort of remainder. So in that case, the answer for this question will be that, and that is pretty much your remainder for this question, right? So otherwise, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you had a good one, and I really hope you learned a lot from this video and just how we solve these types of questions. Once again, if you are looking to really supercharge your NBT learning, we do have a dedicated course where you can actually get, as mentioned, up to 1,500 plus questions just like this, and even other harder questions, more in-depth NBT questions. And all these questions that we've put in our course were informed by our experiences and questions that we saw in the NBTs, right? So definitely go ahead and check it out and you can get 20% off for a limited time. And also in the course, if you want, you can also purchase the course with additional tuition as well. So if you want one-on-one tuition, you can of course get access to one-on-one tuition with myself and our tutors to help you master your NBT. So go ahead and check it out on our website. The link is in the description. All the links to our course, NBT resources for you, are all in our description. And yeah, really hope you enjoyed the video, and I guess we'll see you then in the next one.